Chapter 23. As the sacred days slowly approached, the atmosphere in our household changed. Mom prayed a little harder and got up earlier to say longer prayers. Meals were more lavish. There was always meat on the table, just for Jen and me. We no longer argued with Mom about this unjust inequality among family members. We simply shoveled the food down and returned to our studies. Our sisters lowered their voices when they walked and talked past our rooms quietly. But the biggest change was in Dad. He actually bought some flying horses and slipped them into my room late at night. No words were needed. He badly wanted me to succeed. 2 days before the exam, the whole town of Yellowstone gathered to gossip and watch the candidates. Every third family had someone taking the exam. Few public events mattered as much to the townspeople. A militiaman from the commune paraded through the street with a loudspeaker, shouting about the virtues of the exam and yelling encouragement. "Don't panic, be brave, have a strong heart, and be prepared for both failure and success." The slogans roared through the speakers, which had been mounted on the front of the muddy tractor. People listened quietly as the tractor drove noisily by. It was wartime, and the young people were going out to do battle. Food vendors loaded up their supplies and rented spaces near the test sites. Yellowstone's high school and elementary school, where some of the tests would be held, were swept, mopped, and dusted by hundreds of temporary workers. The desks were all numbered, and school teachers were called back from their break to be monitors. The commune had several thousand exam applicants, all of whom were going to crowd the town of Yellowstone, the seat of higher learning, and take the tests that would determine their futures. Word was out that Peking Man was going to give his final predictions on the history questions. Since the entrance to the school was sealed, he would hold court in the commune's auditorium. His moment of glory had finally arrived. The site of much political significance was turned into his shrine. I strolled along the street for the first time in months and headed for the commune. Jen felt ashamed to be among the younger crowd. He stayed at home and took a nap. Only the graduates of Yellowstone High were allowed in. Hundreds more stood outside the hall. Peking Man had set the rules. He was a tribal type, loyal to his own kind and nasty to all others. We sat on the crowded floor with the rest of our sweaty classmates. The surface of the street could have grilled a fish, and the temperature within the auditorium would have made a baker want his job back. Hundreds of eager faces were waiting for Peking Man to perform his annual ritual. Everyone was solemn, pressured by peers, family, and society to succeed. What was usually a rowdy crowd now sat quietly as if awaiting sentencing. Peking Man strolled in, sporting a t-shirt 2 sizes too small that revealed a couple of inches of his hairy potbelly and a pair of loose shorts that were cut too long. His legs were more bent than they appeared under long pants. That explained his unique side-to-side rolling walk. The crowd took a deep breath. It would be our first brush with the examinations. It brought a raw awakening within us. Peking Man was silent and serious. He gazed at us with the look of a savior, a doctor. "I know your pain, and I am here to take it away." His eyes sparkled with those wild lights so rare among modern men. He opened his mouth a couple of times, but no words came out. A stutterer was a stutterer. On the 3rd try, he made it. A loud sound filled the hall with echoes. It sounded like a cry from some ancient creature, but our hearts responded to it. It was a war cry. "My students," he called, "this is a battle, and I am here to give you the weapons." Any other day, the house would have rocked with laughter at so silly a declaration, but not that day. That day we believed him. It was wartime, us against the world, and it felt good to have Peking Man on our side. I felt like standing and saluting our hairy commander of the Monkey King. "I have made my decisions after a long and hard search." He rolled his sad eyes and refocused them on us. "Here are my top selections for the year." He threw open a portable blackboard. Written on it were 4 long essay questions. The crowd scribbled furiously. There were only the sounds of pen fighting paper and the noisy breathing of Peking Man, who seemed to have a loose valve somewhere, another of his unevolved organs. He then went on to explain the tricky points hidden in his questions, piloting us through them like a seasoned sailor in troubled waters. He dodged, turned, and twisted. His logic was clear and his delivery forceful. His face gradually wrinkled into a smile. Normally, when he smiled, we ducked our heads, for no one wanted to witness the display of his big yellow teeth, but this time it was comforting, in a devious way. To us, those teeth were weapons. Each of these questions could be worth 25% of the score. Nail the answers in your brain. If any of you comes out of the test missing these questions, any part of them, you will not call me your teacher anymore. Now go. He leaned on his elbows and nodded his huge head, indicating his farewell to all our miserable souls. We rushed out of the hall for some fresh air. Another 5 minutes, and some of us would have been carried out on the stretchers. The day before the test, the street of Yellowstone was alive with thousands of applicants coming to town to see this test site, so that they wouldn't get lost in the next day's frenzy and confusion. Stone-faced militiamen walked and the sealed sections of the school. The test takers nervously looked beyond the yellow ribbon. For the well-prepared, that day was the day to rest. The 3 long days of test-taking would be exhausting, to say the least. I saw the head, the snob, dribbling a basketball absent-mindedly, like a girl. Silently, I wished him luck. May he open his paper and not know a thing. Others were just sitting around and chatting, killing time. Han, my elementary school enemy, wasn't one of them. He had been studying, but the stuff was coming out from his granite head, his mom said. That day, he was sitting before a tall pile of books, not knowing which one to read. His mom said he wouldn't eat, talk, or sleep. I also wished him luck and hoped that he'd faint on the floor of the test site and never wake up. Since early morning, Dad's friends and neighbors had been coming to wish us luck, good luck. Our Duong, whose son was Dad's patient, carried a large basket of fruit and insisted that we eat it all so that we would have fresh minds. Chen mingled with our guests in the living room, taking it easy. I knew he would do well. He was smiling and looked relaxed. I had gotten up at 5 and had washed my face extra carefully. Mom and I had prayed and kowtowed before every single god in her shrine. She had just unearthed a new one called the God of Wisdom and wanted me to beg hard before him. I had slammed about 10 big ones to him, and I was sure every one of them would be worth something. I was the only one from the town of Yellowstone to register as an English major. Only 8 others in the commune were taking that major, so the National Examination Commission decided to lump us together and have all 9 of us take the entire 3-day exam in the city of Putin, where our final subject exam, English, was to be given. Everyone in my family silently watched me pick a foldable bamboo mat, a sack of rice, my chopsticks, a rice pot, 2 bags of books, and some clothes. My youngest sister, Wang, was pumping air into a borrowed old bike. She would be giving me a ride to Putin. It felt as if they were sending me off to the battlefield, a place so far away that my family couldn't be with me. I felt an inner sadness, but I didn't show it. I was 16. I threw my luggage over my back, pushed out my chest, and smiled broadly at everyone. I wanted to tell them by my actions that I was brave and ready to take on the enemy. Right before I stepped into the street, I turned and ran upstairs to my window. I knelt down and begged my grandfather to come with me to Patin and watch over me as I wrote the answers. He had loved me so deeply and expected so much of me. It was he who had taught me the first strokes of calligraphy, his hands over mine. I needed him now more than ever. I told him that I would do honor to his name, and that all his sufferings at the end of his life were not in vain, because they had given me strength and would be the basis of all my success. Tears filled my eyes as I called out on his spirit again and again. On the way to Patin, Huang and I talked for a while. Then I took out my flashcards to review the English conjugations. I remembered them so well that I was sick of them, but I was terrified my memory might suddenly fail and all that knowledge disappear without a trace. We arrived at Hillside High School at the edge of Patin after 3 hours of hard pedaling against a headwind. The school had been temporarily converted into a camp for the test takers from around the country. I followed the sign and found my name on the door of a dark classroom. I settled in and sent my sister home before sunset. It was a zoo. At least 1,000 students were bunking there for the next 3 days. The kitchen was overcrowded. I had put my rice pot in the steamer in the afternoon. It took me half an hour to locate it at dinner time. I ate my cold rice with dried fish on the lawn in the playground and stared at the stars. I had intended to do some studying before going to sleep, but it was impossible. There was no light, no room, and I was constantly surrounded by a mob of mosquitoes. Like the city people, the mosquitoes were sleazy. Their snouts drilled like needles, and their sting stayed with you for a long time. Daylight finally came. I crept to a quiet spot and knelt down for a brief prayer, then fought my way through the kitchen, this time easily finding my rice pot. The trick was to put it in late and get it out early. I slowly swallowed half the rice I had steamed and left the other half uneaten. The first test was Chinese. I was ready. At 7:30, a man led the 9 of us English majors on a mile-long hike. We found our test site at the top of a hill and waited outside like runners at the starting line, ready to dash as soon as the bell rang. Rich kids arrived with their big-shot daddies in cars that left a dusty trail. City boys had long greased hair and fashionable clothes. The girls had long, silky legs, partially covered by flowing skirts. I wore a yellowed cut-off shirt, a straw hat, and shorts, and was barefoot. Nobody looked my way, as if they had sized me up in a second and immediately dismissed me as ignorant country bumpkin in the wrong crowd. I was thirsty, dizzy, weak, and tired, and felt the need to go to the bathroom again despite having visited only 5 minutes before. I closed my eyes and prayed in silence as I waited in agony for the time to pass. Grandpa, dear Grandpa, help me now. The bell brought me back to reality. I ran into my test room, sat in my numbered seat, and closed my eyes again, holding my sealed questions. I felt like puking. My hands were trembling. The proctor, a bespectacled bald man, nodded at me with a kind smile. "You may start now," he said. I broke the seal with my pen. As I focused my eyes on the first question, there was a sudden rush of blood to my head. My mind went blank, and I had to grit my teeth and grip my table to let the feeling pass. No wonder some people were carried out by ambulance. I didn't want to be one of them. Slowly, the darkness receded. I read and reread the question and wrote down the first answer of the day. The test lasted for 4 hours and ended with a long composition that was worth 45% of the score. I came out smiling to myself. The first thing I did was head for a quiet corner to kneel and thank all the good gods who had helped me through this first test. I saw others, strangers to each other, chatting and talking excitedly. I didn't want to get involved. It was over. I stayed on the hilltop under a tall tree, munched on some dried fish, drank some water, and reviewed my history flashcards. There was a guard sitting near me. I gave him a flying horse and asked him to wake me if he found me dozing off and to make sure I wasn't late for the test. At 10 minutes to 2, I put away my history book and looked for signs of the guard. He was snoring away like a buffalo, his lips twitching. Obviously, he was having an erotic dream of some sort. Too many young females taking the test were wearing enticing shirts. I smiled from ear to ear when I opened my history paper. Peking Man had guessed 2 of the 4 questions. Each would bring me 15% of the total score. I let out an animal cry of ecstasy as I left the room, then danced down the stairs. Others watched, as though I were crazy. Long live Peking Man. I knew all the answers and had plenty of time to check every nuance of the questions as Peking Man had taught us to do, analytically and clearly. I wanted to take a picture of him and frame it above my college bunk bed and pray to him. He was almost a god. They should at least make him a local god of Yellowstone High and give him whatever he wanted from life. That evening, I ate twice as much as the day before. I was halfway through, only 3 more subjects to go. I sailed through the second day like a sleek sailboat. The English test came last, and it came as no surprise. I knew every word and irregular conjugation. There was a long translated article, a story about a magic ring. I had never felt as confident in an examination before. The large bag of exercises given to me by Professor Way covered all the questions and more. I wanted to hug her and tell her she should become a goddess too, and that I would frame her picture and worship it every day. When I walked out of the test room for the last time, my burden dropped to the ground. I was free. Even the city folks began to look okay to me. I was ready to hug and embrace anyone when I saw my brother looking for me. I ran over to him, and we shook hands frantically. "How did you do?" he asks. "Couldn't have done better," I said, out of breath. He had come to pick me up and share all the details of the experience we had come through together. We forgot about our fatigue and talked, laughed, smoked, and talked some more. We compared answers, thinking that we had gotten about 85% right. We were ecstatic. We rode home in the fading sunlight. The breeze was gentle, the air cool. Our hearts were light. My brother had become my best friend. We had fought together, and at least in our hearts, we knew that we had won. The next day, I woke up to the painful twisting of my ears and nose. I tried to get up, but my legs were pinned down. I opened my eyes to see my 4 friends making ugly faces as they tried to wake me up. "Hey, what's up?" I rubbed my eyes. "We're taking you hunting, college man," Xiang said. "I heard you did well in the tests." "Yeah, everyone's talking about it. Mo Gong gave my ear another twist. We're going to take you out for a day of fun." Yi pulled my quilt off and lay beside me. Sin was nudging my behind with the butt of his hunting rifle. "Wake up! We've got catching up to do. Who knows, you're probably going to be out of here in no time." I spent the whole day shooting birds in the thick woods, eating fruit and smoking. Sin had brought a bottle of liquor, which we passed around. Mo Gong was a little woozy after a few greedy gulps. We sent him to pick up the fallen birds. At one point, he stumbled into wet mud and almost sank into a mud hole. We had to pull him out. Then he rolled on the ground until dried leaves stuck all over his body and started dancing around like an aborigine, singing weird tunes that sounded like Japanese folk songs. I threw more leaves on him, and he danced even more madly. Chen passed the bottle to him, and he finished it off, totally drunk. He started to laugh so heartily that it began to sound like crying. Then he collapsed on the floor, still in a fit of uncontrollable laughter. We had to kick him to stop his craziness. Then we carried him to the middle of a wooden bridge and dropped him into the Dongjing River. He continued laughing until he sank beneath the water. We applauded, expected to see him jump up like a fish for air, but 1 minute passed, then 2. We looked at each other. "Don't worry, he's fooling this time." Chen was calm. "He could never hold his breath for that long," I said. "He's a better swimmer than you are." "But he could be dead. He's drunk, remember?" "Even a drunk is always 30% clear-headed." "Don't let him fool you," Yi said. "The guy is dying. Do something." "I'm going down there." I took off my shirt and jumped into the water. My actions brought them all to the edge. Suddenly, Mo Gong shot up like a fish and let out a wild cry. "I got you!" "See, I told you," Chen said. Mo Gong swam to the edge. "I saw it all. Daw was the most worried about me, not you guys. If I'd come up and seen you still there on the bridge smiling, I would have quit being your friends." "I really like that, Daw. Your shorts are soaked." We splashed water all over him and forced him into the river again. Jin's mood waxed and waned in a daily cycle. Some days he thought he had scored well. Other days he thought he had drilled holes in the boat and was sinking. For the moment, he threw himself into farm work. On a good day, he would hum and whistle, digging the field in readiness for the autumn bean season. He was the amicable old Jin everyone liked. On a bad day, he would stay in bed really late, the quilt over his head, thinking of all the questions he had missed. He used the abacus in his head and crunched the total score of his tests, but the more he crunched, the lower his scores got. He made himself miserable. We called it the cousin Tan factor. In the evening, I sat with him in our backyard and chatted. Mom and Dad had given me the job of encouraging him. They didn't want to see him turn into a nut. I would pull out our bamboo abacus and play with my estimate of his scores as he remembered them. When he said 70%, I threw in a modest 5% markup. In the end, the total looked fine. He was surprised by my estimate and wondered how I had come up with it. I told him he was too hard on himself. Then I'd go to our kitchen and pour some locally brewed liquor for him. Resistant at first, he would drink it nonetheless. It would loosen him up, and we and the rest of the family would sit talking in the moonlight late into the night. I was the opposite. My own estimate of my scores kept going up. Everyone in the family laughed at me. It was a pure gut feeling, but they believed me and were glad for me. No one stopped me from climbing my ladder of dreams. A month later, rumors began to circulate that the papers had all been graded and the scores were in. The scores were low across the board. All the test takers gossiped among themselves. Jen at this point didn't care anymore. It only made me pray harder each night, hitting my head against the soft pillows and obeisance to all the gods. Obeisance to all the gods I assembled in my head, to whom I read off my lists of wishes. The lists got longer each day, and the list of promises to the gods grew more generous. I went from 1 little piglet for each god to 5 piglets, and 2 cows as sacrifices if all the items on my list came true. And I knew that if that happened, I would probably have to bankrupt our family, returning all our worldly possessions to the places they had come from. But that didn't stop me. I figured we could always deliver the sacrifices gradually, or even make out an IOU for the gods. When all was repaid, we would add on a handsome interest. They would have no problem with that. During the course of the morning, word leaked out about the score line. This was a line the government drew to cut off the successful applicants from the unsuccessful ones. It was based on how many slots were open for college enrollment that year. If there were only 100 openings, the cutoff line would be set after the top 100 scores. Everyone above that line was guaranteed a place in college, while the rest of the applicants wouldn't be considered at all. This year's cutoff point was 300 out of the total 500 points possible. The news sent chills down our spines. We all must have done terribly. Just after midnight, the messenger Chen ran into our house, sweat covering his red face. He was breathless from the 3-hour ride that he had just cut to 2. We surrounded him, watching his heaving chest with great anxiety. "Water," he croaked. "The scores first," Dad said. "I'm really thirsty." "The scores." Dad's voice had never been that loud with a friend before. Chung smiled. We stood by, our hearts in our throats. "Jen first," Chung swallowed. 350. There was an odd lull. Jen was in. His face first turned ashen, then red. He was speechless. "How about Da?" "You want to know?" Yes, what is it?" 380. I felt the blood shoot up the very top of my head. All the muscles in my arms twitched uncontrollably. "I'm not finished yet. According to the record, Da has one of the highest liberal arts scores in the province of Fujian, including the big cities of Fuzhou, Amoy, Shuangzhou, and Nanping, out of hundreds of thousands of test takers. There were no joyful shouts or happy dances, only tears. It was a moment of triumph and happiness for the whole Chen family. Mom was in Dad's arms. My sisters were sniffling and holding each other. Jen and I shook hands wildly. A dirt-poor country boy, beating all the city brats. I couldn't believe it. It was about 40 points higher than my highest estimate. I could kowtow forever.